Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Steph. I'm not gonna lie to you, I had a different introduction for this to begin with, and I'm changing it up because I wanted to let you know before we get into this vlog, which this vlog is a rereading vlog. I will be rereading the Shades of Magic trilogy in anticipation for Threads of Power, which I won't be reading in this vlog, but I will definitely be reading it in another vlog. But the reason I wanted to redo this introduction is because I was so kindly invited to the Shades of Magic read-along hosted by Abbyoffprint and a bunch of other awesome creators, and I will have them tagged below. I believe by the time I'm going to be able to get this out, the live show for the trilogy will have already happened. So if it has, I will link that down below. If not, I will remember to come back and link it. So that being said, this vlog is my spoiler-free rereading vlog of the Shades of Magic trilogy. I read the Shades of Magic trilogy back in like 2016, and I think I finished it in 2018. I took a long time between the second and the third book for whatever reason. I don't really remember why, but I took a very long time between the two, and I ended up loving the finale, but I didn't really love the beginning of the series. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't have that much recollection of what this series is about. I mean, let's be honest, at the point of me now filming this introduction, I have finished the first book, and I can tell you for sure that I didn't remember half of what happened in that book. So if you don't know anything about the Shades of Magic series, the first book is A Darker Shade of Magic, the second book is A Gathering of Shadows, and the third book is A Conjuring of Light. And so in this world, there are four separate Londons. There's the Red London, which has an abundance of magic. There's White London that is bleeding its land dry to be able to access magic. There's Grey London, which has no magic. And there's Black London, which we don't know anything about. We only know that it fell and something traumatic happened that caused the doors to all of the Londons to be permanently sealed. So there was no longer traveling between these Londons. The only people that can travel between these Londons are the Antares, which is what Calie is. And Calie happens to be the adopted son of the king and queen of Red London, and they use him as a messenger between these different Londons to talk to the other kings and queens. So on one of Calie's trips to Grey London, he runs into a girl named Lila, and Lila is a pickpocket. She is a thief. She's mainly been living on the streets. We don't really know why. We know that she's very poor. Her parents are no longer around, and she's just trying to survive. And she pickpockets Calie and takes the wrong thing from him. And so their paths intertwine, and there is a lot of chaos that ensues that could potentially be the fault of both Calie and Lila. So throughout the series, you are seeing Calie and Lila's stories and how they intertwine. You get to meet characters like Holland, who's from White London, and he is enslaved to the king and queen of the White London throne. You get to see Calie's relationship between not only his adopted parents, but his adopted brother, who he's very close to, and what that relationship kind of leads him to do, and how it's sort of reckless. And his recklessness leads to a lot of trouble for Red London and potentially all of the Londons. And so I remember when reading this story, each book got better and better for me, and I loved the progression of the chaos in the story and the characters. I do remember Calie and Lila got on my nerves, more so Lila than Calie, and I loved Rye and another character named Alucard. But anyway, let's get into my spoiler-free thoughts of the first book.
Woke up wanting you beside me. I don't know what else to say. Ain't no particular reason, just hit by your wave. Maybe I'll grab a cup of coffee and listen to our favorite song. I'm such an idiot, I'm pathetic, thought I was moving on. I don't want anybody, I want you. I miss your olive skin, I miss my muse. So if you wanna find me, make a move. I'll send a telepathic message with my coordinates to you. Right where you left me, impatiently waiting. The rest of my day went to shit.
So I'm 50% in. I'm still loving it. I would say that I'm loving it even more now because there is so much that I forgot. This is spoiler free, but there was a scene that just happened that I absolutely do not remember. I don't remember it at all. I like vaguely remember scenes sort of surrounding this situation, but the actual scene I'm talking about, didn't even remember it happened. So I'm having such a good time. And what's funny is like my memory of this book is me taking a really long time to get through it. And I think I've come to the conclusion about why I didn't love this series as much as I am right now. Like the first time I read it versus now, the difference is not just the audiobook, but like how I was listening to it. I was really only listening to it during my commute, which I had a lot. I was commuting to work and I was commuting to a family member's house because they were sick. I was commuting a lot, but I think just being in the headspace that I was at that time, listening to the audiobook and taking so long to get through it, I think I felt like this book was not as fast paced as everyone had said it was. And I didn't feel like it was as engrossing as everybody was saying it was. Like I couldn't figure out why this was everybody's favorite series of all time. Couldn't stop talking about it. It was on everyone's like top 10 of, I feel like this was like 2016 or 17 at the height of this series. But now I get it. This is a completely different reading experience. Like this is giving me 5-star vibes, and I gave this like a 3.5, and I'm pretty sure I rounded it up to a 4 stars when I first read it. And I'm like, who was she back then? Maybe it's also just the fact that it's been so many years and I'm a different reader now, but I don't know. The other thing that's been really interesting about this reread is like the world building, because this is more brutal than I remembered. I really don't remember it being this brutal, and like some of the fight scenes and some of the magic scenes are really intense and really grotesque, and I don't remember that. So yeah, it kind of feels like I'm reading this for the first time, and it's been really, really fun. So yeah, this is giving me 5-star vibes. I'm definitely loving the character development. I feel like the characters are much more vivid than I remember. I feel like the writing is so much more engaging than I remember. Like it doesn't read slowly. It's not boring. I'm constantly turning pages. I'm constantly wanting to know what's happening next. Also, I've been doing that thing where I'm like at work or doing other things that is not reading this book, and I'm like, oh, I really want to go back and read A Darker Shade of Magic.
Like I promised I would, even though you wouldn't do the same. I'd give you the world like I promised I would, even though you wouldn't do the same.
I have finished my reread of A Darker Shade of Magic, and honestly, this is one of the best rereading experiences I've had in a long time, only because this was so much more fun than I even remember. I am settling on probably a 4.5 stars. I would say it's a 4.5 stars. I'm also so confused at former me, past me, who said this was slow. I don't know what I was talking about because the pacing in this is so fast. Like it is so fast paced. There are certain plot points and characters that are introduced in here that I thought were in book 2, but as a matter of fact, book 1 wraps up in a way that's like very satisfying. It almost feels like a complete novel. There are some open-ended questions and certain plot points that definitely can carry over into the rest of the series, but this was such a contained novel, and I was really surprised by that. This time around, I just read the whole thing physically, and it was such a great experience. Also, annotating this was really fun because there were so many lines in here that I absolutely adore, but also I think that the world building is so well done. Much like any other fantasy book, there's obviously going to be some questions about the magic system and the world building that you're going to get answers to as you move forward with a series. That's typically how it works. You're not going to get all the answers in the first book, but I do feel like I didn't remember the world building being so extensive in this first book and so well done. I just think this first book was really well crafted in general. general. And so my rating definitely has gone up. My enjoyment has definitely gone up. I can see this being a favorite reread of the 3, and I'm excited to see if this becomes like a 5-star series for me in the end, because I remember loving the second book so much. If you were to ask me before this reread which one I thought was my favorite, I definitely thought that it was Gathering of Shadows, if not A Conjuring of Light. Like, I really enjoyed A Conjuring of Light, and it's the one that I remember the most about. We'll see with this reread. I don't know. The first one was really fun, and I feel like this could potentially be my favorite one, because I do love a first book in a series. I love being introduced to new characters and like falling for them, really getting to know how they interact with the other characters in the book, and if some of them are annoying or not annoying. The thing is though, I do think that Lila is still sometimes annoying and frustrating, but I didn't mind her as much in here, so I'm wondering if maybe the narration was what made me kind of annoyed by her. And Kel, I really enjoy Kel. I feel like he still needs and will have a lot of growth in this series. I actually don't remember if he was among some of my favorite characters by the end, but right now I do really enjoy him. I enjoy him as a main character because he is pretty flawed, and he also is in such a weird position where the king and the queen have raised him like a son, but also like a servant in ways, a servant to their son. And that's a very interesting dynamic because he loves them like parents, but at the same time, he has an arm's length type of relationship with them where he doesn't feel like they truly love him, even though he truly loves them, and he's constantly questioning whether or not they actually consider him their son. And then him and Rye's relationship is also really sweet because they really genuinely do love each other as brothers, and I think that's also what makes Kel question his relationship with the king and the queen, is that his relationship with Rye is very authentic and very real, whereas I think maybe with the king and the queen it feels a little superficial and surface level, and that maybe they're keeping him around just for Rye. And I mean, because he's a very powerful Antari and he can travel between the Londons. So it's an interesting dynamic, and I think that like he has sad boy hours because of it, but it makes sense, you know? He's also a little reckless, which I find to be kind of fun because obviously it has spurred a lot of things in this book and potentially in the rest of the series. Also, this reread really solidified my understanding of the Londons and how the magic system for Antares works and how they can travel between the Londons. Whereas when I was reading it before, I definitely didn't grasp onto that well enough because I was just kind of going with the flow, but I had no idea how that flow was flowing, you know? I definitely now have such a solid understanding of the magic system and for the most part the world building that I for sure didn't have before. I'm curious though if that carries on in the rest of the series, because one of the things I do remember, and it's something that lowered my rating in the end overall of the series, was that there were a few gaps in the magic system. I don't know if it was so much the world building as much as the magic system. And so now I'm curious if I only felt that way because I didn't actually have this great of a grasp on the magic system as I do now. Also, I am forever obsessed with Holland. I love Holland as a character. He is technically a side character, but he also just feels like a main character. He's very complex and he's very dark, and his story is very dark. As a matter of fact, this story actually is very dark. I don't remember A Darker Shade of Magic being so dark and intense at times. I also love the way that Holland and Kel interact with each other and that there's this unspoken respect for one another because they're both Antares. I really enjoyed that dynamic, but I do love Holland a lot. I wish we got more from him. And speaking of getting more from a character, I didn't realize how little Rye is in this book, and Rye is one of my favorite characters in the series. He's Kel's brother, and there was so little of him in this book. I just didn't remember that because he is at the beginning of the book, so I was like, oh yeah, Rye, yes, love him, so excited he's here. He's not. It's barely even about him. So I'm really looking forward to jumping into Gathering of Shadows, especially because supposedly it's my favorite book. We'll find out, because what I'm finding out is I don't remember anything about this series. Hello, good morning. So I am very tired because this little woman right here won't stop meowing at me all night. She does this thing where when she wants to wake me up, she'll get on my pillow and sit on my head. So she was doing that last night, and then all this morning I was like, okay, well, just lay next to me. And if I wasn't touching her, she was meowing in my face. But since I've been up since like 5, I have been listening to A Gathering of Shadows, and I'm a quarter of the way in, and I'm really enjoying it. I really love the lead up to this competition. I'm also really excited about the competition because if you know me, I love a competition in a book, so I'm excited to see the competition again. I'm also listening to this on audiobook, which is not ideal for me because listen, I don't dislike Michael Kramer and Kate reading, but you know when you listen to so many fantasy books with the same narrators that it just becomes jarring? That's how I feel. I feel like Kate and Michael have done enough. We've seen enough. There's been enough. I really don't need every popular fantasy series to be narrated by them. And I feel like that's just what's happening. It's not that it's like making the reading experience bad or anything. It's just that I would prefer to be physically reading it. Okay, you have to look at Olive now. Look at this. Oh, you're gonna have some rest now? Okay, so I just finished making breakfast and my matcha for this morning, and you know what that means. I'm sitting down to read, but I wanted to update you because I'm on part 8. I'm having a really fun time. I know yesterday I sort of updated that I was really enjoying the book. I will say though that I didn't remember that the Essentosh, which is like a competition, happened so late in the book. Like we're a little over 300 pages in and we're just getting the first competition. So I definitely don't remember it happening so late in the book. I really thought it was going to happen earlier. So once I was at like 200 pages in and realized that certain things weren't aligning where we were going to get to this competition, I was confused because I distinctly remember that one of my favorite parts of this book was the competition, and usually pretty picky about competitions. Like I tend to like them when they take up the majority of the book, if that's what the book is trying to be. But I guess I can see myself being a little more forgiving with this book in terms of the competition and the length of the competition within this, mainly because of everything that happened in the last book. We are now seeing how people have recovered from what happened in the last book. We're also seeing where characters have kind of gone after everything that happens, because the second book takes place a few months after the events in the first book. But the one thing that like I actually really love is Kel is such a sad boy. He's just living sad boy hours day in, day out. Because this boy doesn't know happiness if it slapped him in the face. He's slightly dramatic, I would say. She also is living sad girl hours day in and day out. But you know, she probably gets that from me. The other thing I'm having a lot of fun with is the introduction into a couple new characters. And one of those characters I absolutely love. They are one of my favorite characters in the series overall. And I'm really excited to have them so early in the series. I think I thought they came in halfway to the end of this book, but no, they've been here the whole time. Anyway, this was really brought to you by the fact that I just read a scene where Kel couldn't have been more sad boy energy, and it made me want to update. It's just so funny. I shouldn't be laughing at his pain, but it's just very funny how the sad boy hours are constant, round the clock. Today I'm so excited. I'm living my best life. I'm living my fall life. I've also finished A Gathering of Shadows. Here's the thing, I did have a fun time. I ended up rating this one 4 stars. Shockingly though, this was my least favorite of the first 2. In my memories of reading this series for the first time, I remember loving this one because of the competition. And I constantly maintained that this was my favorite one, this was the best one in the series, and like maybe it is, I don't know. I didn't really have that experience this time. While I had fun, I obviously gave it 4 stars. There were so many things that bothered me in this book that I don't remember at all. But I mean, is that shocking? I've been saying this whole time that I don't remember much about the series. It's like I'm reading it for the first time. But at the same time, I understand things well because I remember the magic system for the most part. I mean, I do feel like I learned a lot from the first book that I don't remember in terms of magic system and world building. So the reasons that this has kind of lowered itself in my mind, basically Kel and Lila are insufferable throughout this. I was kind of joking before about Kel having nonstop sad boy hours, and like the sadness starts coming and it don't stop coming, and it's like that's great for a time, but when you pair that with Lila also being very frustrating and them kind of being separated through the entirety of the book, and I guess like the whole crew is separated, and while there's a competition in here that I fondly remember, it's not as grand and it doesn't take up as much of the book as I even recall or wanted. It was fairly exciting, but it also was another point of frustration within this book because there are some annoying things surrounding it that I'm like, okay, this isn't as fun as it could be. So while I had fun for the most part because one of my favorite characters, Alucard, is introduced in here, him and Rai maintain being my two favorite characters, and they continue to prove in this particular book why they're my favorite characters. And it's funny because I do have an appreciation for both Kel and Lila. I just don't enjoy their dynamic particularly. I don't really understand their dynamic. I'm not quite interested in their dynamic. I don't really love when they're interacting with each other. It's never like memorable or fun for me. It's always a very can we get this over with energy, and that's not a good sign. And a lot of this was them like circling around each other and not getting to the point and saying the things that they wanted to say. But the thing that I was having the most fun with was the piracy type sailing the seas moment. I really enjoy a pirate book in general. I enjoy sailing the seven seas. And so that was really fun, and that's what I was maintaining throughout this book as being the fun part for me, because there is actually a lot of us being on the ship with Lila and her sailing and learning how to be a pirate or sailor. And you know, Alucard is a sailor as well. It was fun to see a change of scenery, but on top of that, it was really fun to see the magic system expanding. Because of the Essentosh, we were seeing different forms of magic being used. We were seeing magic being utilized in ways that we haven't been introduced to before. So that's really fun, and I do enjoy that the magic system keeps expanding. So yeah, I'm kind of disappointed with this read because I was having fun, and there are a lot of great moments in here, and this does continue to read quickly. The pacing is much quicker than I remember, and obviously there are a lot of fun moments in here. I do think the competition is fun, but I feel like if you love Kel and Lila, then this won't be as annoying for you. I feel like you would have a really fun time, but their dynamic just wasn't fun for me. But you know whose dynamic is fun for me? Rai and Alucard. I think that they have interesting banter, and I also think that Alucard and Kel have a hilarious form of banter as well. Even though I'm ranting more than raving about this book, I think it's just because I went in with the expectations that I was going to give this 5 stars and love it more than the first one, because that's how I felt when I first read the series. But it's quite the opposite experience. I loved the first book more than this one. I'm also curious if it's because the first book definitely feels like its own contained story, and so I'm wondering if that's because V.E. Schwab didn't know if she was going to move on with the series, and so maybe this book feels a little bit clunky in terms of what it's trying to be, because it wants to be a middle book, but in some ways it doesn't feel like a middle book just because things were so not neatly wrapped up in the first one, but they were wrapped up in a way where it was like we didn't have that much to continue with, you know? So she was using the second book to open that door to have a finale. And so it almost reads like another first book in ways, but we are expected to kind of already know these characters and kind of expected to already know the dynamics of these relationships in the book. So I don't know, it was very awkward. Be that as it may, I gave this 4 stars. So take my criticism with a grain of salt, I guess. Anyway, I'm moving into the 3rd and final book. Although I guess it's not the final book, right? Because there's gonna be a spin-off trilogy. Threads of Power, that's why I'm rereading this. Hi, it's Friday, so you know what that means. It's cleaning day, so I look like this. But I wanted to quickly update because I just made it to 254 pages of A Conjuring of Light. Look, we match. And I'm really enjoying this one. This book's pacing is constant. It is breakneck. Like there is something happening every single chapter, every single second. But there's just something about this particular book and the way that the story is being told that is really captivating for me. Like it works really well. The tone has shifted shifted completely in a way that I'm really enjoying. The pacing was much better. I'm connecting more with the characters in this one than in the second one. I mean, in the second one for me, like Rye and Alucard were the standout characters, like I said. I feel like all of the characters that we've gotten to know throughout this series are standing out in one way or another, and I really think that's just the way she's telling the story. I don't know what it is about this one that I just love so much. It's so captivating, and I even remember I took like a year between reading A Gathering of Shadows and A Conjuring of Light, and I still was like immediately sucked into it and knew what was going on and like could follow the whole story. And to this day, A Conjuring of Light was the one book that I could tell you the most about. If you were to ask me, why would you ask me? I don't know, but if you did, I could tell you a lot about it, and I still can, even though there's like some nice little surprises that I totally forgot about. Also, this book has already made me tear up like 5 different times. So I think it's safe to say that this will definitely be my favorite book of the reread. I finished A Conjuring of Light. I didn't have many updates to give you because the pacing of this was so fast paced. Like it was nonstop. I ended up giving this a solid 4 stars. I was leaning between a 4.5 and a 4 stars. While I enjoyed it a lot more than A Gathering of Shadows, there's just some things about both of the books that they're 4 stars, but for very different reasons. And like I said when I was giving my review of A Gathering of Shadows, it wasn't that I hated that book. I just liked it a lot less than I remember liking it. And I personally think that overall this series for me is a 4-star series. Whereas previously I would say that it was like generously a 4-star series. Now I can say it's solidly a 4-star series. There are characters though in here that are chef's kiss 5-star characters, so I'm very excited to see what happens in Threads of Power because I have a feeling we're going to see some of these characters. I don't really know. I haven't read the synopsis. I don't exactly know what to expect for Threads of Power, but my hope is that some of these characters will be moving forward in that series and we'll get to catch up with them, and hopefully that means that this new trilogy is like a 5-star trilogy for me. I had so much fun with this book. I think that the pacing really helped this book. I felt like the stakes were really high. I felt like the emotional impact was there. Certain things that were supposed to emotionally impact me very much did. I found myself tearing up a lot, especially in the beginning and the end of this book. There were lots of tears. There were a lot of happy tears and sad tears. And there is a lot of ambiguity and kind of open-endedness to this book, which makes me think and hope that those things will be resolved in this next trilogy. Now, when I read this the first time, I think maybe that's why this one wasn't the one that stood out to me as my favorite, even though rereading it, I'm like, yeah, this was by far my favorite of the series. But I think why it didn't stand out last time is because I really genuinely was bothered by the open-endedness. I had no idea this was going to be another trilogy or an expansion. I don't know how related they're going to be, but I didn't know another trilogy was happening in this world, potentially with these characters. Not that I need it to be neatly wrapped up in a bow and handed to me, but I do feel like you've gone through this whole progression of character arcs and a whole plot arc that ends, but there are certain things that like don't really end. I think the other part of that is that there were a lot of questions that were left unanswered in here that didn't really need to be unanswered. Like it didn't play into the intrigue of like, oh, there's another trilogy. This is so fun. We may get those answers in this next trilogy. It genuinely was like, why are we leaving this on a cliffhanger? So I guess in that regard, it's very frustrating. And I will continue to complain that I think Kel and Lila had moments where they were really likable and I remembered why I enjoyed them as characters, and then they had moments where I was just very frustrated. I'm frustrated by their dynamic specifically. I just don't buy it. I also had like weird feelings about Alucard and Lila's relationship because there were moments in it that just felt like, why did we choose to do that? But I also enjoyed moments where they were teaching each other things and having this push and pull of, I hate you, but I also really admire and respect you, and I wouldn't want you not in my life. In terms of Kel, the sad boy hours never ceased to exist. They never stopped. Round the clock, 24/7. DJ Kel with the sad beats. Like, I get it. I understand where he's coming from. I understand why he feels the way that he feels about specific situations and people and circumstances. So I'm not saying that the sad boy hours shouldn't exist or needed to cease, but sometimes it got a little overwhelming. And then add into the mix certain dynamics that he has with other characters. I was like, okay, this is getting frustrating. But I think that Rye and Alucard and like the king and the queen and other different side characters in here just really made this book for me. So yeah, I feel like my reread of this book was very positive. Although funny enough, I went and checked my rating of when I first read it and I gave it 5 stars. I don't remember doing that. I thought I gave it a 4. At the very least a 4.5. It's now a 4. And I still stand by the fact that I think this is a really great finale. I think that it has a lot of action. I think that it has a lot of great character arcs. I think that the stakes are high enough. But yeah, I really enjoyed my reread. I had such a great time. I don't think my reviews were great. They weren't as comprehensive as I was hoping, but then I realized that there were certain things that I can't really say without it being spoilery. But if you would love a spoilery discussion, I will leave a link down below for the World Hoppers discussion where we did talk about the trilogy as a whole. By the time this video comes out, we will have done that discussion. It is tomorrow. So we'll have that discussion ready to go. I'll link it down below so that you can watch the spoilery discussions and see what we all enjoyed and didn't enjoy. I'm very excited to talk with everybody. I don't know that I've ever discussed this series with anyone except for Jared. I had Jared read the whole trilogy a long time ago. If I had to rank these books, I do feel like I would say it's A Conjuring of Light, A Darker Shade of Magic, and then A Gathering of Shadows. But I almost want to say that A Darker Shade of Magic is my #1 only because it was such a surprising reread for me. It was the most surprising of all of these rereads because I just don't remember liking it as much as I liked it this time around. So I feel like it has to be #1, but A Conjuring of Light had me in my feels, and there were so many characters that I love that are in A Conjuring of Light that are not in A Dark Shade of Magic. So I'm just gonna put A Conjuring of Light at #1. But I did really, really love A Darker Shade of Magic so much this time around. But anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this rereading experience with me. And if you've made it this far and have nothing to say, feel free to leave a crown emoji in the comments below, and I will talk to you next time. Oh, one more thing. If you want to watch some videos that are related to A Darker Shade of Magic and the series from the co-hosts in the read along, I will have a link down below that will send you to a playlist that has all of their videos. They're all awesome creators, so please go check out and subscribe to their channels. I would really appreciate that. So anyway, this is goodbye for real. Bye, friends.